And we're live. There it is. Okay. Hello, and welcome to the Literary Roadhouse Book Club. Today we're discussing A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. I'm Anais. Our guest today is John L. Monk, a Virginia-based author and podcaster. He is a writer with a degree in cultural anthropology who boldly does the dishes, roots out evil wherever it lurks, and writes his own stunts. If A Head Full of Ghosts whet your appetite for the spooky, check out John's supernatural thriller, Kick. You can learn more about John at his website, john-l.monk. We'll do that again. You can learn more about John at his website, john-l-monk.com. A link is also provided in the show notes. Welcome to the show, John.
Hey, I'm really happy to be here. Oh, and by the way, I'm no longer a podcaster. The TBR podcast is no longer kind of going anymore. So, no, I'm a podcast guest now. Yeah.
Oh no!
Thank you.
Anais.
Oh yes. Welcome to the network. Do you have a show you want?
Oh, I see.
Yeah. We just bring them in slowly.
Hey, this is the Halloween show. You got to get the cackle in somehow.
Mm-hmm. The spider web gets caught in the cobwebs of the Literary Roadhouse Network. Yeah, actually, listeners might remember I think it was in May I was on To Be Read, and a guest we've had on a few times on the other podcast and on this one, Michael Laron, also I guess was on TBR. Goodbye, TBR.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. A lot of reading.
You see, you may not see me, but I'm here.
Yeah, I was going to say, also with us today is Literary Roadhouse regulars, who you have just heard, Maya Good and Gerald Hornsby. I'm just doing that in case we get new people for the book club.
We're always here.
All right.
To do.
Should we jump in?
Yeah. Oh, so much to say. So much to say.
Yes. Okay. Let's start top level with everyone's overall impressions, like we always do. John, what did you think of the story?
It's so unfair. It's funny. I was very close to. I was actually very close to maybe saying that I couldn't come on because I couldn't give an overwhelming, glowing response about how I felt about the book. I enjoyed it. It did keep me turning the pages. There was a lot of great realism, but I also had issues with it probably from the beginning. There were a lot of cultural references that kept on popping up and sort of like Bigfoot hunters and stuff like that. And that turned out to actually be sort of a red herring because there was a really good reason for them to constantly be talking about other reality television shows. And I didn't know it in the beginning. And so I was like, why do they keep on talking about all this reality stuff? And it was kind of pulling me out. So that was actually probably really a problem on my side. Another overall impression I would say is that I thought the book was kind of cynical, and I wasn't looking to read anything cynical, and a little bit hopeless, and I wasn't looking to read anything kind of hopeless. And I thought it was preachy without being preachy, with religion bad, voyeurism bad, reality TV bad, that kind of thing. Despite that, I liked the book. I just had issues with it, and I was worried that maybe if I came on, and here I am as an author, I didn't want to be trashing other authors, or even coming close to that. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that happens. We sometimes have to dig in, and none of us want to trash authors, but I think when you have an author like Paul Tremblay, who has such a large catalog of books he's been published for, I think you can kind of just look at this work, and it definitely doesn't say anything about him, and we try to provide a balance. So Maya, what was your impression?
I, like John, had issues. I think a lot of my issues actually could have been solved if the book had not been marketed the way it was and set up an expectation for me. I think that this book was mismarketed. I think if it was marketed as upmarket fiction, if I didn't think it was going to be horror, if I didn't think it was going to be thriller, I might have actually enjoyed it more as a character study of how trauma and religious extremism affects a family and reverberates through all the members of the family. So yeah, I did have issues, but I think a lot of that is because I was expecting to come into this with, you know, a few spooks, faster pace, and to be riveted from the beginning. And it didn't read that way at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Gerald?
Oh, gee, this is
This is going to be one of those shows, Gerald.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like I was expecting a horror book. I was expecting, you know, Stephen King was scared. Oh, it must be real. And yeah, the cultural references and the nods to various horror films, it got a little sort of annoying. Later on, I sort of realized that that's the point, and it is and when you've read the whole book, you sort of understand why the. But at art, it's just this stuff you think cliche all the time, and so it's as John said, you know, it wasn't just competently written; it was well written. I thought,
yes,
page turning, no problems getting through it, and but there are issues with it too. But we'll come to that.
Yeah. Listening to all of your sort of feedback on your general impression has helped me sort of fine tune mine. This is why I always go last. Huh? So I think I figured out what it is.
Sneaky.
Yeah. The main plot of the story with the sisters, when you focus on the sister story, which he tells you, like, the main story is about the sisters, focus on the sisters, and what happens there is the best part of the story. And the tragedy by the end, I thought, was absolutely moving, which is why I left this novel and I felt like this would have been better as a short story, in my opinion, because all the other stuff, like all the cultural references, the preachiness that John mentioned, I think got in the way of a really, really good tragedy.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. So going to what
because
Maya was saying. Yeah, Gerald?
Yeah, because that's what it is. There is, you know, there are sort of underlying themes of the book, which are really very little to do with horror, and more to do with you know, this family dynamic, family drama.
Yeah. So what Gerald just said had little to do with the horror, and Maya was talking about the marketing. So because Halloween's around the corner, or by the time this gets published, Halloween just passed, did it scare you, Maya?
No, not at all.
No.
Not at all. No. That said, I have a high threshold for horror. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I can read some gnarly stuff. I'm not into like bloody horror, but give me stuff that like gets under your skin and will make the average public think this book shouldn't have been written and should be banned. And I'm cool with it. Like, I love Let Me In. What is it? The Children, whatever. I recently watched a Serbian film, which everyone says don't watch it. Like, it's been banned in certain countries. So like, I have a high threshold for like emotional, psychological trauma in my fiction. But then later on, I realized that it wasn't just that there was a reason why I wasn't getting that ramp up and why I wasn't feeling scared. So no, I did not feel any fear at all. And I think because of structural issues I noticed later, I think it was with the novel and not necessarily because of me being a jaded, horrible person.
Yeah. John, you also said no. Was that?
Yeah, it wasn't scary. Not in the slightest. No offense to Paul. I hate saying that. Well, I don't know that, but in his defense, I don't know that he was looking to write like a shocky, scary kind of story. In fact, he took pains to pull us out of the scariness on, you know, in two different ways. One, with the interview with the book writer, and two, with the sort of overly snarky, overly clever blogging, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit later. I will say that I thought that it was sort of like a postmodern take on The Exorcist. And in fact, sort of like, is it a real demon? Is it just psychology stuff? Is it a real demon? Is it psychology? That came right out of The Exorcist. And I thought it was done much better in The Exorcist. The Exorcist scared the holy crap out of me. The book, not the movie.
Yeah.
The movie was good, scary too, but I read the book within the last 10 years, and I thought, I actually was like, you know, you don't even have to be a Catholic to be afraid of the book, because the demon in the book it sort of manifests itself in a way that was troubling to Catholics. And it was just such an incredible read. And it seemed like A Head Full of Ghosts kind of tried to do that, saying, is it this, is it that, is it just manifesting itself in a way that would scare a person who's susceptible to religious fanaticism? And I just thought it was kind of like a pale imitation of that, with like a sort of like modernized for the times with Bigfoot hunters and wacky reality TV stuff. So.
It's interesting you said that, John, because I was curious whether or not this had been written as a horror story, because I originally wondered, because all of his other stuff isn't horror. Like, this is his first horror book. But he's written horror short stories. So I was thinking, well, maybe this was literary fiction that got moved into horror for marketing purposes. So I listened to an interview, and he actually said that he went into this trying to write a postmodern atheist exorcism book. And knowing that, I see where he was going with it.
Was it atheism or agnosticism? Because I think that it was...
No, it was supposed to be a postmodern atheist exorcism book, and where you're not sure if the person's really insane or whether they are being possessed, and talking about religious fanaticism and mental illness, and so I get where he was going with it, but I think something went wrong.
See, if you leave that door open to the paranormal or the supernatural, I don't know how you can call it atheism. I can only say that's agnosticism, because it's sort of atheism says that there is none. Am I wrong about that?
No. No, I was going to say, no, you're not wrong about that. But what I was just going to jump in and say, though, is I do see what Maya was saying. I did get the atheism angle pretty clearly, because the authority on what really happened is Mary's voice. And Mary, well before the exorcism, when she's talking to Rachel, says, everyone was watching my sister break into full-blown schizophrenia. She says that several times. So like, it's like signaling heavily. At no point are you as a reader supposed to wonder, is there really a demon? And I think if as a reader you do, it's that point that Mary makes at the end of the book, which is even non-believers believe on some level. So I think as a reader, we're being agnostic, but Mary, the authority of the book as to what happened, is atheist throughout.
I agree. That's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did it scare you, Gerald?
Nope.
Nope.
No. Sorry. No. Did. I guess references and
yeah.
And I came back in the discussion about the Exorcist, and it just seen this, and so it wasn't still scary.
By the way, there were 3 instances in the story, or three times in the story. One time kind of goes to the whole story where where you're left to decide whether or not it's real or not. The first time, which goes to the whole story, is the amazing knowledge that a 14-year-old girl has. Now, we never get to see her before the change. Now, before the change, she could have just been a little girl skipping along, just as brainless as any kid, and then suddenly she's a rocket scientist, right? So that's one thing. Like, a demon comes in, I've got a head full of ghosts and they're all real, And the second one is, does she hover in the air or does she not hover in the air, right? So that's the second one. And the third one, I don't know if you guys caught it, but like there was that sort of like special effects that Paul Tremblay threw in the end of the book where it's cold all of a sudden. I mean, he doesn't say it's cold for no reason. He's not going to say it's cold for no reason. He's not that bad a writer. He's a good writer. So telling us that it was suddenly extremely chilly and the person at the counter is like, I didn't touch the AC, I'm going to call the person, that was for our benefit to go, is it real or is it not real?
Oh, I actually found different places. I'm curious. Anise, when do you think were the points where you started wondering, is she really possessed or is she mentally ill?
Well, by the time we got to the reality show, I was 100% on the she's mentally ill train, because it's like, okay, this is going to sound like a horrible way to say it, but like I feel like the first 20 to 25%, I actually did get a little spooked because I wasn't there yet for the big sort of like thrill. You know what I mean? I was I was picking up on all the little things he was putting in there. Like one of the things that kind of spooks me was when Mary wakes up and she has a leaf painted on the back of her hand. But because she had done all the security system and this girl sneaks in, I'm like, ooh, okay, maybe there's some like supernatural thing happening here. So there was like these little spookings that happen that can only happen really at the beginning of a book, which is why in the first 20%, I was more inclined to be spooked by tiny things because I feel like you're massaging me, Arthur. You're setting me up for the big scares at the end. So the only time where I was wondering, is she maybe possessed is in the beginning of the book when he's dropping all these clues. But by the second or third time, Mary's so sure that it was mental illness, I'm on board with Mary. Like she's my dowsing rod, so to speak, because even though there's all of this chatter about how, well, she doesn't know what the true story is because of the reality TV show and all the news stories, blah, 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 she actually has a very clear narrative of what happened. Like she isn't an unreliable narrator, even though she says she is. She's like, I'm an unreliable narrator. Here's my very clear narration, So I always believed her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't believe her.
You didn't believe her?
No, I found her very unreliable. I think she was an extremely effective, unreliable narrator. I the story, but there were points where I was like, maybe. For instance, a lot of the things that would happen in Mary's room, for instance, that moment that you talked about, Anais, there was that scene where the house and the blanket gets sucked into the house and the house like flies at her and then Mary's asleep. Okay. And so in my mind, I'm thinking she either could have snuck in there and been really quick, but there's cameras everywhere, or she's telepathically doing this, which makes sense. And like, ghost lore, as far as not so much ghost, but post-pubescent female energy being chaotic. Spiritually or whatever. And so there was always like this, it could and could not, even to the point where even very early on in the film, she tells that story to Mary about Dad's going to kill everybody. That was very, very early before Dad was really acting crazy. And then everything happens, and when she's saying, I want Mary in the exorcism, she says, if Mary is not there, something really bad's going to happen. And then when Mary is there, she says, everyone's going to die. And then everyone does die. And so, in my mind, I felt like the author set it up so that you could go on two streams of thought with the story. Doesn't make it scary, though. It just makes it two streams of thought.
But so why was Mary unreliable for you?
Well, one, she's 8. And she's experiencing trauma. You have a child with trauma that's going to affect memory. It's going to affect time stamping. There's a whole series of issues. Then you intersperse that with the fact that she's had outside influences as far as what's real memory and what's not. That particular age group is very sensitive and really susceptible to false memory. And so regardless of how sure she sounded of herself, she was always going to be an unreliable narrator. And because she presented herself as an adult so clearly, didn't change that. Now, what reinforced that was her complete change of voice for her blogging sections. I didn't actually like her blog character, but at the same time, I see that where the author was going with it by having the personality so different, you can see that her own personality isn't necessarily cemented really well, which kind of makes sense.
Plus, there were all kinds of little lines where she was going, oh, we all talked at once. Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, I
go ahead.
I found the posts really annoying. They're a chatty sort of, hey guys, and the space and other stuff. I just thought to write in that voice, which is so different to the other voices, but read.
It's not Mary's voice.
Exactly. I had the exact same reaction.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my notes is Mary in like a deep con here, where she's like putting on this kind of like toolish voice so that nobody knows she's Mary, like as if she spoke eloquently, everybody would figure her out. Like that, it was very frustrating to me. Like this is clearly not her voice. And then why is she doing it? Is this like some like deep undercover like? Just it's actually I was talking to a friend of mine. I'm like about this book, and I was like, it's almost like she's like role playing at being a blogger. Why? It's just very confusing to me.
And the coffee, and she studied show, and she said, told Rachel to go and check her blog, and Rachel said, "Oh, your blog was so insightful, so great. It was really well written."
I didn't even need to hear his response because I heard that, and I knew exactly what he was saying.
Yeah. John, you were going to say something?
Yeah, there were a couple of occasions where she said, I didn't remember that, but then I realized all along that I did remember that. And just kind of like little places where she sort of undermines herself. And as far as the one thing I thought might be kind of a cool move would be that whatever was going on with the older sister upon her death infected the younger sister, so that she kind of goes through life with this superpower of being like kind of spacey and weird and a little bit creepy as an adult, but like totally sister, up in your face and kind of weird and like, suddenly she's this Perez Hilton kind of person, on the blog. But as soon as she turns off the blog, it's like, I am very strange. And, do you like my dolls? I have all the books about horror. But then she's like, leave Britney Spears alone, when she's on her blog,
The Paris Hilton of horror. That perfectly describes the blog in the novel.
Yeah. And actually, I guess we're just going to jump ahead to blog chapters. But okay, so the voice we all picked up on makes no sense. But there was another thing that the blog chapters were doing that really annoyed me. So I feel like I said, the tragedy of the book is beautifully written. But then there's these blog chapters that's like either Paul Tremblay doesn't trust us to figure out that we're picking up on his themes, and he has to tell us directly, because these blog chapters are like, in case you missed this, the scene you just saw, let me explain it for you. Here's all the references. Did you miss it all? So either he doesn't trust the reader, like, why do you think we're not going to get this? Or he doesn't feel, but this can't be it. Like, he doesn't feel like he got it across, but he is subtle in other places. So like what Maya was saying about, because I agree, the 8-year-old's unreliable. When I Mary's reliable, I mean adult Mary, in terms of how, like, I think her story is the closest to the truth. But 8-year-old Mary doesn't understand that Ken is like super guilty about this. I'm picking up that Ken is having a bit of a moral, quandary about what he's really doing here.
Yeah, he did. Clearly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
For me, the issue with the blog chapters, the issue with the voice is a characterization issue. It's not the only characterization issue I had in the story, but it was probably the most significant. But I actually think that had I not gone into this as a horror novel, I would have enjoyed those chapters more, because it was doing something interesting as far as the novel construction. It just didn't quite work all the way. I think if it had been done in a different voice, it actually would have worked. So it did a couple things. It broke up the tensions, so that normally in a horror novel, you get all tense and freaked out, and then like you need a little bit of a relief. Sometimes it's with humor or whatever. But in this case, the blog chapters kind of was like a tension relief valve to prepare you for the next bit of tension in the book. Really? Dang it! Am I still broken up?
Was it just me?
It was just you.
Oh, okay.
It was just you. Okay.
All right. All right, continue. I'll figure it out.
I have no idea where I was.
Go. I'll cut it.
I'm trying to remember my point. I'm sorry. Somebody else go. I can't remember my point. I had a point.
I will say one thing. Let's see if you can interrupt as soon as it comes back to you. But I thought maybe the blog chapters were all, from a person who writes books, I guess. This is terrible, but it does sort of make the book longer. It gets the book to kind of the size you need. It was like 2 books going on at once. So.
Oh, I remember what it was. For me, the blog chapters, you know, in horror books, you read them and like the scary scene happens, and then something happens to kind of release the tension, and the scary scene happens and something happens to release the tension. That's what the blog chapters do, the blog portions. And it shows a instability of her emotional state, which makes it so that the adult Mary isn't reliable either. So little Mary's had trauma, and that's affected her emotional development as an adult. And so adult Mary isn't entirely sure who she is. And I think that comes out through the blog post. But also the blog post, the story is told from Mary's point of view. So what we're seeing is Mary's point of view. The blog posts are what actually was shown on TV. So it's a dissection of that. And I think that that's important. I just don't think it was done well.
Yeah.
That's a good point. We needed to see what the shows were like, and that was a good way of showing that. So
Yeah. I see that point. I still wish it was done just
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
The whole like
I hated them until about 200 pages in.
mm-hmm.
Like literally I would see like the little entry of like her description of the blog. I go, oh no, not again.
So you say about 200 pages in.
Yeah.
So there was one towards the end that you liked?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, I felt it happened just at the right time. I can't remember which one it was, but after about a little bit past the halfway point, they stopped annoying me, and they fit the tension of the book better. The first one, every time I would start to get into the story, a blog post would pop up and pull me right back out of it. And so I was struggling to get into the book. I was past 100 pages in before I could read like for more than 20 minutes at a time.
Yeah. Gerald, did the blog chapters pull you out? We haven't. Is he there? Because of the...
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
I'm
hi.
here.
Mm-hmm.
They in a way, the first one sort of made accept the cliche, the horror cliches, because early on in the story it was annoying cliche, and then you get the blog post. Okay, so it's you know, cultural references, blah blah, and I think they could have stopped there, or could have done something differently to show us that it's like he's beating us about the head. He has a blog post continuing. There's things at the end of the book saying, you know, where I learned from. And that's it. And here's the cultural references, and here's films you need to watch. And you think, no, I read a book and that's it. I'm not interested, to be honest. So I think he could have achieved what he wanted to achieve better without the blog posts.
Mm-hmm. And so the blog posts, well, a little bit what John was saying, it makes the book longer, and you kind of have a certain like word count that you need to hit, and it sort of affects the pacing of the book, right? There's that tension and it pulls you out, the tension and it pulls you out. And it also, I felt that the blog post was going to somehow be more direct. So the plot changed for me, and like I didn't guess where the story was going to go in a way that I actually found a little frustrating initially, and then I just loved the tragedy. But in the beginning, because it's called A Head Full of Ghosts, and Mary is saying, you know, oh, I don't know what the real story is because of all these different versions of it that you've seen in the documentary and in the reality show and in the media. So I thought there was going to be these ghosts of other people's stories about her own life, and that was going to shine through, and then that was going to be paralleled with Marjorie's mental illness, and that didn't actually really happen, which was surprising to me.
Yeah, that would have been a really good thing to have brought out. I do think that the blog post, though, did tap into one of the themes, which is the effect of media. So we've got a lot of the symptoms that are attributed to why she has to be possessed, or things that she could have gotten on the internet. She's bullied online after this happens. People have really dramatic reactions to the reality TV show. She's got all these people in her house when she's seriously ill. You've got people on the front lawn protesting it. And then afterwards, you know, you have Mary, whose life has been completely changed by being on reality TV. So of course she's going to be a blogger. And throughout, there's all these little hints of, a lot of the TV shows and movies that are referenced, I don't think you have to read them. I think the point is made that their life is completely consumed by this type of media, and that in the end it destroys them.
And the commentary on media had a little bit of preachiness with it as well. Was that one of the preachy angles that bothered you, John?
Yeah, just there wasn't, I guess obviously we kept on sort of seeing Ken's reaction, his sort of like disgusted reaction. And then there was another character in there. He's like, we got to get the shot. We got to get the shot. And I don't care about anybody's feelings. And then obviously when they faked all the special effects in the room with like this stapler like thing to open and shut the doors, like I started thinking about Ghost Hunters. Like when I used to watch Ghost Hunters, I'm like, well, maybe it's real. Maybe it's real. But every time, you watch Ghost Hunters, it seemed like they were kind of making stuff up. And then you read the book, and it's, it reminds me of that. So as far as the preachiness, though, I mean, we had this guy that was kind of religious Christian, and then he was a little bit Christian, and the wife was not. And by the end of the story, he's gone completely crazy with it. He's messing around with the Waynesboro Baptist Church people, and the wife is totally nuts. And then the author didn't seem to know where he wanted to do with the story, so it's like, hey, let's just make everybody die. It didn't seem like it was. I have a feeling he sat down to write the story, and then he got to a certain part, and then he's like, all right, how do I end this? All right, she's going to kill everybody.
He channeled the ghost of George R.R. Martin.
And that to me is it didn't seem like a very good ending. And I got to read some other books by this guy because he's a very talented writer, and I loved the prose, and I like the way that the pacing went and all that kind of stuff. And I just think that maybe I hit the wrong book, and I feel really bad about saying that.
Can I say something about Ken? Because, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Yeah, I was going to jump off Ken, so go for it.
Okay. Ken. Oh, Ken. When I knew that I was having a problem with the tension in the book was when I kept expecting Ken to be a predator. As I'm very anti the idea that any man that's good to children must be a predator. Like, that's not how I am at all. And when I kept waiting for him to be a predator, I realized that I was grasping subconsciously for any tension in that beginning of the book. And I wasn't getting it. And so I was like, well, there's no ghost. There's no bad guy. It must be Ken.
Yeah. I had the exact same feeling. Okay, again, I don't want to harp too negative because I guess I'll push back on John because I did like the ending, but
yeah, me too.
There was the middle section. The whole reality TV filming part to me was like, nothing's happening though, because he has set you up for this to not believe anything that you see. So you already know not to believe it. Now I'm looking, so where is the bad guy? Is Father Wanderly like gonna make like a lot of money and like run off or something? He's like, where's the thing? So I had that same thing where I'm like, is Ken gonna be a predator? And then I got mad. I was like, if Ken turns out to be a predator, like for the same reason, I don't want men to always be portrayed as predators either. So yeah, I had the.
He was the only.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one.
He was the only really. Ken was the only really sympathetic character in the entire book. I didn't like the little kid even at 8 years old. I just found her annoying. I didn't like anybody, and I wanted to like somebody. And by the way, here's the thing. Yet another, I call it a fourth reason why, possibly why, she might have had psychic powers or something like that, is she singled out the priest as being a purveyor of kiddie porn. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And,
his reaction to that.
And that would be a sort of like a I'm reading your mind kind of thing, if it's true. I mean, this is a girl who was right about every single thing and knowing things that no 14-year-old kid would know. So you almost like, well, if you know all this other stuff, why wouldn't anything else you say be absolutely true? And so he could have been a bad guy. He could have been that evil Ken that you were hoping for or hoping that wouldn't happen or whatever.
Gerald, are you persuaded by Marjorie maybe has powers?
I unlike John, I found the fact, because she's very reclusive, she spends a lot of time in her room, she have access to the internet. I believe that she could have found out all this that she said. So that didn't bother me that she. So, you were talking about Ken earlier, and I actually found Ken quite a good character, because he was sympathetic to Mary, and he played football or soccer with her, and then that priorities lay. So his priorities lay with making the program. So at various times during the story with Mary, showed him, not to be totally sympathetic towards Mary, but actually concentrate on making the program and making the program better. So I thought that was quite a good thing for him to do, whether he did that deliberately or not.
Yeah. Actually, I was just thinking now as we were talking more about Ken. So Ken, his priority was to get a good show out there. That's why he gives the 8-year-old a camera. And going back to what we were just talking about, Maya, about the sexual predator thing, it's also because Paul Tremblay is knowingly, because he is a smart guy, writing in predator tropes. He doesn't just give her the camera in the living room. No, it's a van with no windows. like Paul Tremblay, you want us to think this. Like, why are you doing this? Especially if you're not going to pull that trigger. You just want to spook us with this, I guess.
I think we've also been trained by a lot of cliche television and maybe books, where anytime anybody, go back to Maya's point, anytime a nice guy is nice to kids, we just assume, okay, there's going to be some diddling any minute now, Yeah.
No, I hear your point, and that's what we're saying we don't like that idea. But here's the other thing. Paul Tremblay lives in the same culture we do, and he knows if you have a guy lure a girl into a van, that's what people are going to think, right? He could have given her the camera anywhere else. He could have given her the camera anywhere in the house, but he does it in a van.
Yeah, that's
Paul
true.
Tremblay's doing this on purpose, which is why.
It did seem like grooming, especially because Mary was, if he had been grooming her, it would have been really easy, because at that point she was needy for any attention she could get, and pretty much everyone in the family was ignoring her by that point because they were all wrapped up with Marjorie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not swayed by the Marjorie has superpowers, because I also felt like sometimes Marjorie was grasping when she didn't know things. Like there were times where she would be like, yeah, it could be this, or maybe he'll just do this, or maybe he'll just do this, like pretending it's all the voices, and like she's so coy. I'm like, or she's actually guessing, like So yeah, I don't think she necessarily. Huh?
Google's giving her too much information.
Yes, exactly. She's just trying it all out.
Stories, girls, so many stories.
and again, the kiddie porn thing, is it that Marjorie knows something that the rest of us don't? Or is this to do with the preachiness against religion that's going throughout the whole book? If you're going to be preach against religion, again, hitting on sort of tropes and things that we can, cliches, things you're going to cling on to, that's going to be one of them. So,
or is she just trying to irritate the priest because she knows that's something that will irritate a priest?
Oh, for sure. But I'm saying from an author's perspective, if you're going to make that choice, is it because she knows something we don't know, as John was suggesting that he is, or is it just this preaching against religion that you want to focus on?
An easy, you have a Catholic priest. If you want to get to instantly, you say, kiddie fiddling. It's a very soft time.
Yeah.
To me, her doing that didn't do either of those things. To me, it was just part of her just being a surly 14-year-old girl. Yeah. I remember that. It wasn't fun.
Yeah. and talking about the preachiness of the story, what I realized as John was speaking about the different things that they're preaching on, I feel like whether or not you like preachiness, this is why you're not supposed to preach, is because it really depends on whether or not the reader agrees with you. So I did find the preachiness against religion a bit cynical, even though I'm personally not religious. I'm tolerant of other people being religious. And I found the preachiness against sort of like, oh, this is all faked and everyone's kind of like dumb for believing it, being a little annoying as well. Because sometimes we want to be tricked. We watch Ghost Huntress because we want to be spooked. But here's one preachiness that I liked, was the preachiness where it was everyone is partaking in the spectacle of watching a girl basically be tortured as she has a mental break. That one I liked because that's, a criticism of reality TV that I agree with. So I feel like if you're going to be preachy, you're running a risk of people only like it when they agree with you already.
I agree with that. It seemed a little like Hunger Games or The Talking Dead, actually. Like something horrible happens and we're all just going to watch. I can almost imagine there was a talking possession or whatever the name of the show was afterwards.
Yeah.
I actually didn't find it preachy. I felt like it could have used more nuance for sure. Like everything was a little bit laid out for you, but I felt like you could take this book as anti or pro on many different things. I don't think it was necessarily saying religion is bad. I think it was about extremism. He didn't just pick protesters. He picked Westboro Baptist Church, and he didn't even need to say it because it was obvious. Like these are not normal Christians. You don't say, "Oh, Westboro Baptist Church is bad, so all Christianity is bad." Like it doesn't go along those lines. And so I didn't really find any of it preachy. I felt like there were just themes that could have been used with a little bit more subtlety.
Yeah. Agreed.
So let's dig a little bit more into the characters, because I think it was John who said he didn't really like any of the characters. And so, that's pretty big. I was sympathetic to Sarah, the mother. I felt like she was kind of in between a rock and a hard place. That comment that Mary makes about even non-believers on some level believing, I can see how somebody who, even though they say, I think this is mental illness, still being like, maybe it's a demon, right? Because you don't know, and then sort of getting dragged into this and then feeling like everything is out of control. So I was sympathetic to her and Ken. And yeah, end of list. I liked Mary enough, but that's not a big resounding, So Gerald, any characters you liked?
No, both those characters, not liked, but they were, I thought they were well drawn. I thought they were interesting as children's characters, not with Mary as an adult. Yes, I've mentioned Ken before. So I just sort of, they were like ghosts. They sort of came in and went out, and I'm a little bit cliched. The guy loses his job and goes a bit nuts and turns to God, overdoes the church and God thing, and it's sort of still, as Maya said, there was no nuance, there was no subtlety about it. It was just character.
No. Maya, was there anyone you liked?
Well, I think I hate it when someone asks if there was a character I like, because there are lots of horrible characters I don't like that I like their character. Mm-hmm. So Ken, I think, was really well drawn. He just felt like a real guy to me. I felt like Mary, I had issues with Mary. We can go into that later, but I definitely had issues with Mary's characterization. I felt like it was uneven. Marjorie, I liked her as a character. She felt very much like a 14-year-old girl that was going through crisis. The mom, like you said, feeling overwhelmed and feeling like, she's on this train, she can't get off. And I like that about her. The other characters, I felt like they were uneven and they could have been done better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, especially with the Marjorie comment. Yeah. So let's get into Mary. Why do you think Mary was inconsistent?
Well, the first thing, she came off very young to me. Very, very young to me. She's supposed to be 8 years old at this point, and she hasn't been traumatized before this. So she would be a normal 8-year-old, not like an immature 8-year-old. And she felt very immature to me. Normally, third grade is 8, and third grade is a pretty crucial developmental year for kids. The difference between a second grader and a third grader is kind of big. Mm-hmm. And she did not strike me as a third grader for a lot of reasons. But I was willing to go with it because there was so much trauma happening in the family. A lot of times there was a little bit of age regression. But her reaction at the end of the movie, in the police report, where she's underneath the table for multiple days, sucking her mother's dead thumb, did not strike me as a third grade action. A third grader might have called 911, might have ran to a neighbor, might have just stood there and screamed their head off.
Yeah.
But I don't see them staying in the house. When you look at cases of children being found with parental dead bodies, usually they're under the age of like 6.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Not just the ending where she's under the table sucking the thumb, but there were some other points where I just felt like 8-year-olds are picking up on more than this. Like, yeah, she just felt sometimes like a little too gullible. Like, I understand she wants Marjorie to like her and she wants to be like Marjorie, but I feel like an 8-year-old's already starting to call their older sisters like bluff and already starting to say like, nah, this is a trick, you know? She was
especially 8-year-old
naive.
girls.
Yeah.
This is the year that for females that they're starting to have really advanced interpersonal relationship drama. This is like the first time when it's like, well, if you're her friend, you can't be my friend kind of stuff happens. It all happens in 3rd grade. And you talk to most people, you're like, what do you remember in school when you were little? And a lot of people will come up with a memory from around 3rd grade. It's a pretty important developmental milestone. So I can get her being childish and wanting to play lots and lots of games because she's being ignored by everybody. But you're right. A lot of her decisions, the things she doesn't pick up on, she's going to idolize her sister, but she's also not going to be that gullible at 8 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. So should we just move on then to theme? Are you guys ready to theme, or is there anything else about any of the characters you want to talk about before we move on?
I just want to say that, going back to the parents real quick, if we're going to believe anything that Marjorie had whispered into Mary's ear about Dad pulling her arm out of her socket and other awful things, once again, the whole feeling that none of the characters were likable, sort of like, in my opinion, kind of compacts on itself. I don't know if you guys remember that part.
Yeah, that was actually a memory she had of her dad. Do you remember what that was, Inez? Was it he was pulling her away from something and accidentally yanked her arm out of her socket? I don't remember the contents, but my other main character, she was the dad. I felt like he went from being just generally unstable dad to like evil or religious dad way too quickly.
Yes, though I think this might be a little bit of the 8-year-old unreliable narrator, because there was the socket thing as John just mentioned. There was a few other things about how like sometimes he'd be down to play and sometimes he'd yell at her to go away. And he always seemed, he was always quick to yell and he didn't always come at the table. And so there's this sort of like history of like he has a short temper and he's pretty explosive. And as an 8-year-old, she's not putting it in that way. But here's the odd thing though, because we're not actually in the 8-year-old's voice. It's Meredith as an adult telling us, because she'll interrupt the 8-year-old parts to be like, of course I didn't know that at the time. So she could have said, at the time, I didn't realize that my dad was kind of abusive, but she doesn't. So that was kind of weird. So you don't get a good sense of, has the dad always been a little bit emotionally abusive? A bit, sometimes even a bit physically, like with the arm thing, or, you don't get a good sense of it, and there's no reason why, because Meredith interrupts all the time in her adult voice in the child scenes to tell you. So
I don't think he was originally abusive, because I think if he had been, she would have said that in one of the portions. She would have been like, Dad was a little bit abusive, and then he got religion, and then it got worse.
Yeah. So what's the takeaway that you guys got from the story then?
I just thought it was sort of a confused sort of story where they're just telling different, I don't know, how does he feel today when he goes to sit down to write? I hate to say it, but I just thought it was confused. And yet it was also, well written. And I just think that, maybe read this first and then pick up The Exorcist and decide which one you like more.
Unfair comparison, though. One's like a classic of horror. Yeah. Gerald, did you pick up on any strong theme?
Yeah, I thought. I mean, looking back on the story as a whole and ignoring the supposed horror, got the the sort of dysfunctional family theme, the way that things have happened, scale of the family. There's a whole trope about the reality TV and reality TV and the money that it brings can solve all our problems. Clearly isn't. So that's a thing that he wanted to say clearly.
Yeah. Maya?
I came out with a lot of things, and I think that's the reason why this went from I'm really not liking this book to I like it. Okay. I felt like the interesting parts of this book for me talked about how trauma and mental illness in one member of a family affects the entire family. And then how media and reality TV and our current society will escalate any kind of trauma or mental illness. I thought that was really interesting. A lot of the things that led up to Marjorie eventually dying were a direct result of reality TV. You know, the isolation, the having, you know, being in the midst of this exorcism and things are happening that she knows she's not doing, to the point that pushes her over the edge. Like, I think Barry is completely complicit in her death. And so, you know, the bullying on the outside, just all of that. I think it says a lot about society and family as far as our current society. And that's why I didn't hate the book. For me, those themes combined with the ending were what pulled it out of the I'm not liking this book at all into the I like it. Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The thing about the way that mental illness affects a whole family, the reality TV thing, and then sort of pulling those two together, the way that reality TV is sort of sold sometimes as a way to help, like especially this kind of thing was like, this is supposed to help Marjorie, but it's a complete farce. And as soon as everybody pulls away, because remember, they pull away when she gets injured. They don't even come back for the final interviews. Like as soon as something goes wrong, they're like, nope, and they run away. And then the family is worse off afterwards. So it's this way of how like there's all this focus. Everybody is like gleefully coming down on them, bullying them at school, the protesters outside. And then as soon as the circus packs up and leaves, this family is left completely alone with no support, except the one doctor who's coming. But that's a completely separate thing. They couldn't have had that without this. And then the consequence of that is very sharp when you have the family die. And, you know, we do hear stories of reality TV shows that make people worse off. Like, I don't want to call any one show necessarily, but there's like the worst offenders where it's like this person now is like unhealthy for the rest of their life or had like a break or like something happens to them. And also the way that the show painted them. Remember the way that they were painted the mom as like the surly non-believer and like not giving her any sort of, like the show wasn't giving her nuance and was being unfair to her. So I think that was good kind of preachy commentary on the way that we do reality TV, and that was definitely a theme there. I wish it had been explored a little bit deeper. He got so caught up in like actually filming the show, which is not the point, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
Can I ask a question? Does it? I like a quick poll. Was there even a sliver, as you read it? Like, and you as sitting there reading it as a judge, did anybody here think that there was a sliver of supernatural, or is it no, it's all psychological?
I could have gone either way.
Yeah, the first third I was more apt to say yes, supernatural, but then after that he was so insistent on disabusing me of that notion that I just went with it. You know, so I think at the beginning I was open to it. I think the last moment where I was like, this could be supernatural was the dollhouse blanket thing. That's the last one I was like, oh, this could be supernatural. Then everything after that, I saw Marjorie as a faker or mentally ill, but faking the supernatural powers.
I still think that it could have been supernatural. I right up until the end, it could have gone either way for me. I think that if you were really possessed, that would make you mentally ill. Because the trauma of knowing there's something else inside you would make you mentally ill. I think there's a really fine line between the two, and it can be a little porous. So right up until the end, I still think it very well could have been, just because of some of the foreshadowing that Marjorie did way early that ended up happening in the end. That's what makes me think, you know, it was left open for me.
I'm not, because I don't believe in I don't think possession is not in the sport anyway. So in that way, I just thought, nah, it's you know, I was prepared to go with it because go with the writer's telling you a story, you read the story, and that's okay. No, I think like Anais, after about a quarter of the way through, you think it's all being faked. So
yeah. And I do tend to kind of believe supernatural stuff outside of the book, but just in the universe of the book, he was so clear that it wasn't. I was like, all right, fine, it isn't. It's kind of. So, John, you kept saying that it's a shame that you didn't like the book more because the writing is so beautiful. So what did you like about the writing?
I love the dialogue. I thought that everybody sounded like different people. I thought the characters were, as seen from an 8-year-old's perspective, were sort of like they could only be just so nuanced or anything like that. But the nuance that I got off of mom versus dad versus Ken versus the guy that just wants to make a bunch of money and get the shot versus the priest versus the other priest who was, had no personality, because he was so new. But even his lack of personality, that wasn't a flaw. That was just like, oh yeah, there's just another priest. Mm-hmm. It just seemed realistic. And even the psychologist that we never really saw, or I don't know if it was a psychologist, but it was some medical doctor, he was even more farther removed. So I liked all that. I even liked sort of like the Waynesboro Baptist Church people and the sort of like I don't like them as they're who they are or anything, but just how we got to know them through these sort of poisonous letters, this guy Paul Tremblay, he's got tons of talent, and I could totally see myself picking up another book by him.
Don't you think? Just think about the you think he's sort of playing with the readers, because he introduced a second priest who's just there to pull the clothes up and get bit stuff. He refers to him as the red coat in Star Trek.
Yeah.
He deliberately introduces things to sort of debunk them and make them later on them in Mary's adult voice.
In the blog chapter specifically. The Star Trek comment, all of that, where he's like, all the tropes of exorcism. That's Karen in the blog chapter. She's very snarky.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And that is another, I think I just realized yet another thing I didn't like. It's like, hey, it could be a real horror book. What you wanted, you sat down to read a horror book. It's almost a horror book. It's not a horror book. It's like, oh, no. She was floating in the air. Oh, no, but we see her hand back there kind of holding on. Okay, it's not a horror book. It's like every time you're hoping that it's going to turn into a cool horror book, it's like he comes along and he just pulls the rug out from under you. Now, yeah, that's clever, and it takes talent to do that, but I wanted to read a horror book, so
I'm sorry, she was not holding on to the banister. I've tried a gazillion ways to figure out how you can leap over a banister, be falling forward with your hands behind you, but hold yourself up as a 14-year-old girl, and it's not happening.
I agree with you. I think that if he was trying to convince us that there was like a door to it being like kind of like a physical thing, a non-supernatural thing, he failed there because physics kind of messed with it. But if the author thinks the physics would support that, then it's his book and he gets to say, And
I got a bridge I'd like to sell him.
Yes.
It's funny though. This does speak to the skill of the author, though, because here we are having a conspiracy theory type argument about whether or not there's a C on the rock. You know what I mean? We're like, yeah, but can a 14-year-old really do that?
But does it make it a fun book, or does it just make a confusing book?
Yeah, but sometimes that confusion is intentional, right? But authors could do that on purpose, where then they go to the interview and they're like, so was she really floating? And the author's coy, like, I don't know. It's up to you, right? So he could also be doing a little bit of that. Or it could just be our readers' dispositions, because John, you like to write supernatural. Maya likes to write a little bit of that as well. So then there's a little, it's kind of like not supernatural, but like a little like magical realism. Yeah. So there's this little bit of like, you want to, because of your tastes as a reader and a writer, you're like, please just give me this so I can love this more,
Did you like the ending of The Sopranos, or did you hate the ending of The Sopranos?
And it says more about you than about The Sopranos.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Gerald, just where are you on the levitation? You already said you're on faking, right?
Oh yeah.
We're team fakers over here.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So speaking of endings, John, you said you didn't like that everybody dies.
Yeah, it just seems like he got to a certain part in the story, and he's like, "Where the hell am I going with this? I got to do something. All right, I'm going to kill everybody but the narrator." It just was very. It's just a convenience. It's like it goes back to sort of my problem with horror movies, where evil wins. It's like so many horror movies I see. You care about the characters all the way through, but why did you even bother? Because evil wins. It's like, oh, everybody's dead and there's glowing eyes at the end, and then they come out with a second movie somehow. I don't know. So
that's all horror movies summed up.
I have comments on the language.
Oh, okay. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, don't pass me on that, because I don't agree.
Oh, okay. I'll bring it back. I'll cut it back. So yeah, go language.
Well, that's all I had to say.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get this in because everyone seems to love the language, and I actually didn't. I love the dialogue. I felt like the dialogue was really natural. I didn't feel like there was anything wrong with the language, but I didn't feel like there was anything exceptional with the language either. A lot of horror books that I love use some pretty advanced literary construction, like they're pushing the envelope towards literary fiction a lot of times with horror, and I didn't get any. There was at no point where I was like, wow, this is really beautiful writing. And in fact, especially in the first 100 pages, I kept wanting to cut. Like, there were a lot of words I was like, well, if I was an editor, I would cut that, and it really pulled me out of the story quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think it's written like Stephen King writes, so I don't think anyone would ever accuse Stephen King of writing.
His early stuff was pretty beautiful. Like the Unlock, Firestarter, like his early stuff was really beautifully written.
No, I thought it was written in a very, very similar way to Stephen King.
No.
Sorry.
No.
Not near enough adjectives.
Well, not just that, but so I think the most recent Stephen King I've read, so the prose is fresher in my mind, is The Green Mile, and he has a way of building suspense and tension, and also of drawing characters that are just shy of a caricature that makes them seem big when they need to be, that this story didn't quite do. Like, I feel like Stephen King would have made I'm speculating, so it's just the speculating phase.
If Stephen King she'll come back.
Had like in a Stephen made the priest like a bigger, like authority figure, a little bit more menacing. Like everything starts to feel a little bit bigger, especially the things that are supposed to be, considered like one of the bad guys or on the opposite team. That Paul Tremblay doesn't really do. I'd agree with Maya that at no point did I think the writing was super beautiful, but I guess because it's written in first person for adult Mary, and then it just felt like the conversational tone of it worked for me. So it's because the whole thing is someone being interviewed. There was times where the way that she would stop and reflect on what she just said was really effective. So I felt like I was talking to Mary, or Mary was talking to me. So that worked really well. And I think because you're writing in that way, if Mary had sat there and given me like amazing long metaphors, I'd be like, Mary, who talks like this? Like, really? So I think because of the way that it was framed, it was fine for me that it wasn't necessarily very beautiful. So should we go back to the ending? I'm going to splice what John said here. Yeah. So John had
audio editing too.
Oh, I've gotten quick. So what John had said was that he felt like the ending where everybody dies was sort of just shoehorned in, like I got to end the book, everybody dies. Would you agree with that, Maya?
No, I love the ending, but I'm a horrible person who loves endings that like are miserable and have no redeeming value and make you think the whole world is horrible and there's no hope.
Funny.
I like the ending because it was a perfect book note to Marjorie's comments towards the beginning of the book when she was telling the story to her sister. And I think because of how bad things got with the family at the end is so destroyed. I don't see how they could come out of that okay. Like they may not have all died, but somebody was going to die. Someone was going to commit suicide. Someone was going to go crazy. Family was going to be split up. Like there was nothing good that was going to come for that family after the end of everything that happened in that book. And so for me, it worked really well as a tragedy. I have no problem with tragedies. I don't think we see a lot of modern tragedies in fiction. Like everything's like hero's journey or whatnot. And so for me to have that kind of ending was kind of refreshing, that it acknowledged this family was irredeemable at the end of everything that had happened and that there was really no place else for them to go but die.
I thought the ending could have been better. I think it's because Mary comes out of it is, a young girl and I was manipulated and I would have liked for him to put doubt as to Mary actually did, although she was encouraged to.
Oh, I don't think she did.
I don't know. I think it was, and the fact that she was, she was in the house and more stuff it's not gonna happen. So it seemed like the end was all very, very clear at the end, and I think it could have been explored a little bit more deeply.
Mm-hmm. So I'm more with Maya on this and that. I think what we were all expecting on some point was like Marjorie would commit suicide or be institutionalized, and then the show, and then this had, it didn't. I felt like it was a really good plot twist. You know what I mean? Like I didn't see it coming, and when somebody pulls off a plot twist as a reader, I'm really satisfied. I didn't see it coming, but it didn't seem like this is impossible or doesn't make any sense. So that was really rewarding. The tragedy itself was very moving. Like I got a little teared up, just a little bit, nothing spilled, but a little moistness, because I just felt like it was how do you put it? Like having Mary be a part of it without, that tragic, what is it? What's that phrase? It's like tragedy is when bad things happen to good people, right? Like Mary didn't deserve this. And she's now wrestling it. She's ready to sort of come out of the closet with it. She's telling it to Rachel. Rachel's being very sympathetic. My third thought after this was probably like, what's the statute of limitations on manslaughter? Is she going to get tried as an adult or as a child? Like that was my next thought was, what are the legal ramifications of this? But I don't know. I think that's why I say it should be a short story. I wish it had just been a story about a family. Take out the reality TV shtick of it, even though I know that's a big part of the theme, and just give me a story about how mental illness is affecting this family, and this girl gets sort of like sucked into this murder-suicide thing, and that's a really satisfying story from beginning to end. So that was the part I liked.
So you believe that she killed her family?
Yeah.
I don't.
What?
I think it's a false memory. Because everything that happened after that is not backed up by the police report, and her memories are so just not reliable at anything at that point. I don't trust her memory, and I think an 8-year-old child that's gone through a lot of trauma and her whole family dies is going to instantly think it was their fault, regardless of whether they had anything to do with it. And so the idea of her making up that idea that she must have killed the family makes total sense to me as a false memory.
That's a thought. I didn't think of that.
No, me.
That's funny because I was just like I was so confused.
But it seems it seems like a lot to make up for a false memory because it's false memories. Yeah. You have to have the memory of then Marjorie finding you.
We had in the 80s an entire part of a town, 20% of a town locked up and put in prison because there was supposed to be some satanic abuse thing going on at the preschool. So false memories on little kids can get deep.
Yeah, but that was different because I remember I saw the documentary about that where it's but they were leading the kids to this. They had leading questions and they would have, she's making up a memory of first Marjorie being look at all these stories I found on Dad and he got potassium cyanide and here's the vial in my hand. I dumped some out. And here's the plan we're going to make where they're going to fall asleep. We're going to run away to Auntie Erin's. And she's also making up stories that she was in her room reading a book and rescued by her aunt. That's a false memory, but that's a false memory that she's recognized.
But it's all the same memory. So how can you say, well, the beginning of the false memory is false, but the end of the false memory is true?
Yeah. Actually, this is my last question, John. I'll cut this out. This is my last question. From here, we're just going to do our recommendations. Okay, so we have team false memory, team of one. or John, were you swayed? Do you think it could be a false memory? Was this convincing?
It could be, but I didn't feel Paul Tremblay is a guy who tugs very openly on strings and says, see the string, you see the string. And I didn't feel he was showing me any strings. So I take his word for it that it was real. Mm-hmm.
This is true. The whole blog chapter should be called "You See the String." That should be the name of the blog chapter in the book.
So.
Yeah. Okay. So we're well over the hour mark. Let's do our one sentence recommendations. Should we start with Gerald?
Yeah. Written it. I said, well written, non-scary, horror light.
Okay. Maya?
I think it's an interesting read, but don't go into it looking for horror.
John?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd say it's definitely an interesting read. Definitely, I thought it was a page turner. I thought, I wanted to see what was going to happen next, and for me, that's definitely a thumbs up recommendation. If I had to give it a star rating, I'd say 4 out of 5. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'd agree with what all you guys are saying, and what I would add on is, if you are somebody though who hates reality TV, this is the book for you. Because
look what it can do.
It will kill entire families. Okay. Yeah. Next month, we're reading White Light by Vanessa Garcia. As you read the book, let us know your thoughts on Twitter with the hashtag LRH Book Club, or leave comments on our Facebook page or our website, literaryroadhouse.com. Please leave a review on iTunes and be sure to leave one in the voice of each of the ghosts in your head. And lastly, we're thinking of starting a reality show to cover our podcast expenses, but worry it may actually document and mock our glaring mental illnesses. Please help us avoid ostracization by supporting us at patreon.com/literaryroadhouse. Every bit helps. John, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks. It was really fun.
Really enjoyed it.
You were a great guest. That was awesome.
Thanks.
We hope if you need a note written for your wife, just let us know. Yes, he really did go over, and it's all our fault. Please forgive him.
Okay.
No problem.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.